Well, hello there all you marvelous people, and welcome back to another episode of An Ecologist Plays, a channel where I get to play games and talk about nature, which I love to do. So we are back in Terra Nil, and we are in the polar region, where we have a slight problem. Now, last time we did end with the snow starting to fall, and though that is great, it does come at a cost. You can see the tundra over here disappearing a little bit as the snow falls and it gets replaced by snow and then eventually by grass. So it's a bit of a problem, and we're going to address that in a moment. But first, we need the entire area to be unpolluted, to be cleaned. It actually seems it's not that big a problem. We do still have our tundra up here, so that's actually perfectly fine. I was going to go for a winter-summer cycle, but it seems there's no real need to do that. Now, what we are going to establish now are two biomes where algae are incredibly important, and the first one would be the algae greenhouse to produce lichen fields. We're going to put that here on the little greenhouse, and look at that. We have lichen present, and there they are starting to fruit as well. Now, lichen are really amazing things. They are symbiotic relationships, in other words, very close relationships between fungi, which give the lichen its structure or its body, and then the algae inside, which will give you that greenish color as well, and that is responsible for photosynthesizing and producing food for this very close-knit organism. Basically, it is an organism consisting of two different species that are grouped together to form it. Now, in some cases, there aren't any algae in these lichen, and instead, the role of photosynthesizing is done by cyanobacteria. In other words, you actually have from three different kingdoms in the natural world, you've got organisms living together. You've got fungi, which obviously includes the fungi here. You've got plantae, which include the algae that may form part of the lichen here. And you have cyanobacteria, which are also in a third kingdom. And that is the kingdom Monera. Now, Monera has actually been replaced to some extent by the three kingdom classification, but that's taxonomy, and that's really not my field, and things change so often that it's not even funny. But what is important is that lichen are incredibly important in the polar region. And there are so many species and so many undiscovered species in the polar regions. The polar regions really are under-surveyed when it comes to lichens. And interestingly enough, a museum in Canada has actually been doing surveys in the Arctic, and they have found that a lot of species that occur there also occur in the deserts in western USA, which is interesting to think about. They occur in the hottest environment and the coldest environment. And that goes to show that the reason they do well in both those regions is because technically both are deserts. Even though it is much colder in the polar region, there's still very low rainfall. And as a result, plants that occur there must be adapted to low rainfall conditions, and lichens do extremely well there. And we are going to just keep on putting these algal fields in here, these lichen fields. Now, lichen like these are extremely important, especially in the polar region. They are an incredibly important source of food for animals like caribou or reindeer, depending on where you are in America or in Europe and Asia. But they are the same species, so yeah, caribou or reindeer will eat this, especially during winter. They really will rely on the lichen fields to keep them alive. But not only are they incredibly important sources of food, they also will be fixing nitrogen, especially the lichens that contain cyanobacteria, also called blue-green algae, which is kind of a misnomer because they're not actually algae. They are in fact single-celled non-algae. They are a different group altogether. They are bacteria after all, and as a result of them fixing nitrogen, that nitrogen actually becomes available to the plants around them, so they can help the growth of the plants around them as well. And then lastly, they are incredibly important for stabilizing soil, especially considering that this is a desert environment. And as the snow melts, these plants in the tundra over here, they're not really flowering or growing yet. They may be present, or the dry twigs may also be present, but they aren't in mass as they are at the moment here in the game. So the soil may be barren, and if you've got a nice covering of a biological crust or living crust of things like lichen, then that actually can protect the soil. And they also are, surprisingly, important when it comes to forming soil as well. You can see them growing on the rocks here, and in the game here they form on the rocks. They will be secreting incredibly strong acids And in the process of doing that, they break down the rock, and that releases the minerals that they will be using to fuel their growth. At the same time, they form soil. They break the rock into soil. It's not an incredibly fast process, but it is an incredibly important process. And as a result of them doing this, it actually forms quite a lot of soil around them. Over millions of years, they produce a lot of soil. So lichens, very often overlooked, but incredibly important in the polar regions and all over the world, actually. In South Africa, in our desert environments as well, you also find them. And then when it's wet, when there's mist rolling in from the ocean, they actually swell up and photosynthesize. And then when they get dry, they shrivel up and they look like tiny little loofahs lying all over the sand. And they go about their business, photosynthesizing and doing their important things, just carrying on in life. Anyway, that's lichens. Lichens are incredibly important and, as I said, very often overlooked. What we are going to be doing now is actually, I think, yes, we are going to put more over here, and then we are going to have to find a way. There we go. I think we can do it like this. We take the monorail and we put it in the ocean over here, and now we are going to have kelp beds establishing. And there we go. We're going to have a good look at it when the snow stops falling. So for now, I'm just going to carry on with doing this. And we'll look at that. We've actually got enough kelp beds. We'll be moving on to the animal part in a moment. I'm just still putting in kelp beds. Now, kelp, like these larger things we can see all over the world, this is all over the place here. There's actually a lot of small species, but there's a big one over there. Kelp are also algae, and here we go. You've got a lot of kelp growing. They look very similar to our Eclonia maxima, which we've got in South Africa, which is the giant kelp. We call it giant, but it's not the largest species in the world. Ours get to about 12 meters in length, but there is one along the USA coast that can grow to 30 meters in length. Macrocystis, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, now because there are algae, of course, I need sunlight. I need nice clear water, and that is what we have here. Now, in South Africa, and I'm pretty sure it's in a lot of places around the world, you get kelp beds in nutrient-rich environments. In South Africa's coast, for example, we'll get it along our west coast because the water is nice and cold. They don't mind warmish water, but they prefer cold water, but they need a lot of nutrients. And in South Africa, what happens is what we call nutrient upwelling, which is when the wind blows from the land here, blows offshore, and in the process it pushes a whole bunch of water offshore, and that water that gets pushed offshore actually gets replaced by water from below. And as the water circulates in this pattern, it brings with it sediments and nutrients from deeper down in the ocean. Where the nutrients have been accumulating, it actually gets brought inshore, and now the algae, the kelp here, have a lot of nutrients and they grow extremely well, especially in the summer months when what we call the Cape Doctor is blowing, which is the southeasterly wind, a very strong wind blowing offshore in the southeasterly direction. So in this case it would be like that. So blowing like that, and it actually pushes the water offshore and the nutrients come in as that water gets replaced. Really quite amazing, and that really fuels so many different species in this kelp bed environment. They're like little forests underwater, which is amazing. Now, we're not going to get all of our optional goals here. We're not going to get the migratory birds returning because it is now too cold. I think we had them at one point, but they're no longer coming in. They've left for the winter, which we currently are experiencing in the game here. If we made it a little bit warmer, then they would of course return again, because then we do have a summer environment. And migratory birds are really amazing that they make these thousands and thousands of kilometers or miles journey from the northern to the southern hemisphere. In South Africa, for example, we've got birds that live in Siberia during their summer, and then as it starts getting to autumn there, they migrate to South Africa when we're going to have our nice spring and summer months. And the same in North and South America. Birds in Patagonia in South America, for example, may be in Canada during the Canadian summer, and then moving to the far south when Canada has its winter and Patagonia has its summer. Basically, as I was saying, with kelp beds, and unfortunately now it is snowing again, so you can't really see that, but they're basically forests underwater, where a lot of fish species, for example, will be living there because it provides shelter, it's nice and calm, really is quite amazing. Now, what we have to do, of course, now is to actually remove everything that we have set up. So we are going to start doing that, and I'll be back with you in a flash. I must say, one thing that does make this map a lot easier than some of the other maps is the fact that there are so many rocks here from the lava flows that have solidified that it's so easy to just put up the monorail network. And we're going to be using that monorail system to actually get rid of all our buildings in a moment. Now, before we do, of course, we do need to scan for some animals. So let us do that right here. Now plop it down, the animal observatory, and then look for some creatures. So this first one, and I mentioned it earlier in the episode, this herbivore searches beneath the snow for edible lichen and plants. Lichen really forming an incredibly important part of their diet when it comes to winter in particular, and we should have right over here, oh, they've got elk. Technically, it should be caribou or reindeer, but anyway, they've got elk. I'm sure elk will also scratch around for lichen. Lichen, really an important food source when everything else has died. We're going to keep on, let's just scan over here as well. There's some more elk. So the second species, this strigiform refers to an owl shape, roosts in boreal forests and soars over the open tundra. So we need forest and tundra. Let's have a look. There we go. Snowy owl. Really an amazing bird, if I can find it. There we go again. Oh, beautiful. Oh, there's one roosting as well. So there is the snowy owl, perfectly suited for camouflage in the snow, being white in color. And they, of course, will be nesting on the ground. Surprisingly, most owls we know will be roosting up in the trees, but these guys, they roost on the ground. And they are extremely territorial and very aggressive towards anything that comes too close to their nests. So we're going to put another pair up here. They're going to hopefully not fight with these ones over here. So unfortunately, we only have the 2 pairs in this area. Maybe here? Yeah, we can have here as well. Okay, so we've got 3 pairs, supposedly. I can't see this pair, but anyway. Snowy owls, extremely aggressive. If you are a researcher in the Arctic and you're coming to this area, for example, and there is one perched over here. You're coming to this area to go look for things, and there happens to be a snowy owl nest in this area. Goodness me, I have seen photos and videos of people having their jackets torn to shreds by these guys, dive bombing them and shredding their jackets. Extremely aggressive, massive owls. I would love to see one day. Now, that brings us to this little guy, the vulpine. Now, vulpine refers to a fox-like creature or fox shape. So this little foxy predator is camouflaged in the snow and prowls the tundra plains. So let's see, we should have some snow and tundra. We don't really have much of that left here. Let's have a look here. Unfortunately, not enough. And I think because we've got... yeah, I don't think we've got enough snow for them. They are being outcompeted by the elk here, unfortunately. Aww. Unfortunately, it seems we can't have those little guys. But they are the Arctic foxes. Perfectly camouflaged in winter because they are white in color. And then in summer, being white will be a disadvantage against the brown background. So they change their color of their coat and they become brown in color. This is what we call phenotypic plasticity, where genetically they can have white or brown fur, and then they do that. They change in the seasons when it is appropriate. Really amazing, but unfortunately we can't see them in the game here. Now, this little guy, this tusk-bearing whale, swims in cold ocean waters and under the ice. So let's have a look here. We've got ocean and we've got ice. Not sure whether we need... oh, and it is cold enough, so we can have them. We should bring in the pod probably over here as well. So there we go. Narwhal. We've got some fish, of course, here as well. So they'll be feeding on the fish. There we have the narwhal, the toothed whale. Whale with a massive tooth growing through and into the front of its, well, head. I believe only the males have that, if I'm not mistaken. Females don't have that. So that is definitely a male. We can't really see it properly, but that is a male over there. It has the typical tooth growing to the front of its head. Now that tooth is, of course, used in sparring between males to establish dominance, and then also potentially to stun their prey or to spear their prey. That's definitely what I would be using it for. If I were a narwhal with a massive tooth sticking out of my face, I would be using that to spear my prey. Now, the beluga whale, of course, that white whale that occurs in the Arctic as well, they and the narwhal will be feeding on different things. Now, there have been some weird records of narwhal whales actually hybridizing with beluga whales, which they don't do normally, but occasionally it does happen, and there have been some records of that. And in that case, it's very strange, because the narwhal has got this tusk in front, which the beluga does not have. The offspring also will not have that, and the hybrid will have some kind of mixture between these two. And they have found that those hybrids will actually be feeding on different things than either of their parents. They will be using their weird teeth to comb through the sediments that accumulate in the Arctic Circle. And they actually comb through that for prey animals that are hiding within the mud. And neither of their parents will be doing that or feeding in that way. So the hybrids have actually learned to use their weird teeth that would normally be a disadvantage. They can use that to survive. Okay, so now we have got the next group. From its home on the ice, this flightless bird takes to the ocean in its search for fish. Now, I'm not sure what we need. Ice and fish, maybe? Ice and ocean. Okay, there we go. So maybe... No, we can't really have it there because we've got narwhal there. Maybe we can have it here. Nope, not enough of either. Maybe we can have it here. There we go, finally. There is a colony of penguins. There we go, another little colony of penguins right over here. Oh, that one fell down. Of course, living on the ice, they are one of the few animals that will occur on land in Antarctica. And apart from the Galapagos penguin, all other penguins are in the southern hemisphere. Not all occurring on ice. In South Africa, for example, we've got the African penguin, which is an amazing bird, but they will occur on rocks, on rocky islands, but generally either on islands or on the ice in Antarctica is where you'll find penguins. Oh, shame that one also fell down again. Flightless birds that do their flying in the ocean. Their flippers have adapted, or their wings have adapted to no longer be able to carry their weight. Instead, they are perfect for flying through the water to catch fish. And really, really perfect for that. Unfortunately, with the ice melting, there's a good chance that these guys may go extinct within our lifetime still, with them losing their breeding habitats and the fish associated with that, with the cold Arctic Circle as well. Hopefully they won't, but we'll see. In our lifetimes, they may go extinct. That brings us to the last creature, which you won't find feeding on penguins, because they occur, apart from the Galapagos penguin, they occur in different hemispheres, with the polar bear, which we're going to put in now, occurring up in the Arctic, and then the penguins occurring in the Antarctic. Okay, so what have we got here? Why won't they occur here? We need more snow, we need more ocean, and they need a source of prey. Maybe it's caribou? Okay, so there is food here. It's not enough, close enough to the ocean. And there we go, we have them here. We can finally put in some caribou on the left-hand side here as well. And now we've got polar bears. Now, the polar bears are not very territorial, because food in the Arctic is not very common. It's very sparsely distributed, so they are very nomadic in lifestyle. But they occur individually. They are solitary animals. They won't find two together unless one is a male and one is a female. Can't really see that in the graphics here, but anyway. So maybe these are two that have met up to breed. And they are the dominant predators, the largest predators. And there we go, we've got our polar bears up here as well. They are the main predators, the largest predators at least, in the Arctic Circle. Unfortunately, of course, with ice disappearing in their habitats, they are needing to swim further and further and further each year to find food. And as a result, they are not finding enough food to survive, and they are starving to death. So unfortunately, polar bears, like many of the other Arctic and Antarctic creatures, may go extinct within our lifetime. Now, their hair may be white in order to blend in with the snowy landscape when stalking prey, but their skin is actually black. And that is so that they can absorb the sunlight and actually stay warm despite being white in color. Their black skin will still absorb some sunlight. So anyway, this is quite amazing. I think we have now done all that we could. The only thing we couldn't get was the Arctic foxes. we are now going to just quickly remove everything. And that really is far easier in this map than in the previous one, because we have got our things all over the place. We can very easily remove all our buildings, no problem. Don't even need to put down recycling stations in order to do it. And just by setting up the right network, you can very easily get all of these things recycled. So we're just sending out the drones, and quickly and effortlessly they are just removing everything. Leave no trace behind, eh? And there we go, that should be it, and we are done. The landscape is rehabilitated, and all these spots where we used to have little buildings, of course, when the snow falls again now, it will be covered with snow, and then when it melts, you'll have your grassy meadows growing. And speaking of which, there we go, we've got the area recovering. Ah, marvelous. Such a sight to behold. And this then brings us to the end of today's episode. Hopefully I will on Friday, of course, have another episode of the Hunter Call of the Wild. Until next time, everybody, stay safe, and I'll see you all soon. Bye. And just in case you need some special encouragement, you guys are awesome. I love making videos for you all, and it is really just a blessing to have you all in my community. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.